The rift looked empty from the outside, a ragged scar between spiral arms, but Lieutenant Ardiscale's visor told a different story. A menagerie of gravitic eddies shivered in infrared, each the dying echo of some catastrophic tidal event. Debris, cinders of long-dead moons and crustal plates drifted like black snow. Somewhere behind that curtain of rubble pulsed his target, the Cephalark living fortress designated SAS Kashatin, a creature ship 200 kilometers long, grown rather than built, worshipped rather than crewed. Kael's drop cocoon, a matte black pod the size of a coffin, arrowed through the wreck cloud without propulsion, letting momentum do the work. He lay prone in a polymer sling, biosigns damp to near-clinical death. Cybernetics handled the rest. A subdural mesh wrote go signals over his heartbeat, making him read as one more fragment of frozen liver to any organic scanner. The Titan fleet was still 9 hours out, massive and bright, burning hard from the Orion spur. If Oceanus-Yatan kept its gravity heart online, a single pulse could smear a dreadnought formation across 10 AU. No artillery duel, no heroic carrier battle, just an instant of impossible acceleration and a halo of metallic dust. The pod struck atmosphere, or what passed for it, on the fortress's hide. Kael's first sensation was smell, iron tang mixed with ozone, the unmistakable musk of living tissue. Cephalarch-grown ships covered themselves in a spongiform integument that trapped cometary ice for micronutrients. Inside that, chitinous ribs flexed in slow respiration like tectonic plates on hinges. Kael's suit sprayed reactive foam, sealing cracks in his armor as the pod dissolved around him. He checked the chronometer. 8 hours, 52 minutes. Hefting the rail spear slung across his shoulders, he pressed one gauntlet to the pulsing wall. The fortress's surface was warm. He could feel a pulse, thump, thump, like the baseline of an ocean storm. Finding one of the feeder pores had been simple. Keeping the entry quiet would be harder. He forced nano-harpoons into the flesh, anchoring lines that drank cellular data as they bit. The suit's system translated the infochemical chatter. Immunocytes, microdrones, patrol patterns, acid reservoirs. A living labyrinth always broadcast more than it realized. 3 seconds later, a data node glowed, amber, in his HUD. An electrical gap had opened 3 meters below, a maintenance sinus for the fortress's own biomech drones. Kael rolled sideways, slipped through a membranous slit, and let gravity, or rather, the fortress's whimsical take on it, drop him into the dark. He landed, kneeling on something that squelched and shuddered, but it held. The passageway was a colon of violet gel strung between ribs. Bioluminescent platelets squirmed in the mucus, spelling alien runes he ignored. Kael oriented himself, using the remote ghost of the Titan fleet as north, and set off. The Marines had trained for 8 months in mock sections of Cephalark anatomy. They practiced breaching cartilage shutters, hacking synaptic relays, and blinding the organ eyes that dotted every corridor. But training simulations smelled like antiseptic. Bur-em-Shatan smelled like birth and rot, a cathedral of meat praying to itself. Thick reverb shook the floor in time with the gravity heart's cycle, 31 seconds between contractions. The organ nested deep in the fortress's core, a pearl of compressed space-time clutched by optic nerve cabling and tumor-thick bone. His objective was simple. Implant the star cautery in 3 precise nodes, bleed the heart's pressure gradient, drop its output below the weaponization threshold. Simple, Kael repeated, though he was alone now, the last survivor of Ravenstrike. The briefing had expected a team of 6. 2 had died during orbital insertion when the fortress's flak spores cored their pods. 2 more were lost to an interior gravity shear that turned a hallway 90 degrees inside itself. Sergeant Mayo, his second, bled out when an immunocyte mass dissolved the right side of her helmet. Command personnel had offered an abort window after Mayo's vitals flatlined. Kael refused. Too much ride time. Too many coffins already loaded on the fleet's carriers. He could not bear the thought of calling off the operation, Hearing the Admiral's caution, then watching a billion tons of warship roll into this monster's kill cone, he crawled through viscous corridors, ducked behind calcite pillars when white-armored antibodies buzzed by, their tentacles testing the air for rogue pheromones. His camouflage wasn't perfect. Each pass shaved seconds from his margin. At one choke point, he had no cover. Cale waited for the next gravity pulse, jumped high as gravity inverted for a heartbeat, and sailed over the patrol. They bellowed in infrared, but by then he had dropped into a maintenance cilia shaft and was sliding feet first toward the spine. While he slid, he opened a memory packet Mayo had left in the squad channel. They were supposed to watch it together after extraction. Mayo on a beach older than the war, surf hissing around her ankles. When this is over, I'm buying you one day without armor. He stored the packet again. Armor or nothing, he thought. It's all that's left. The shaft spat him onto a ledge above the dorsal nerveway, a gorge flooded by electroplasma. Down its center, a nerve trunk thicker than a skyscraper pulsed with sapphire light. Antigrav mites drifted around it like dandelion fluff, nibbling at stray charge. Cale had to cross, but a bridge grown from bone plates arched temptingly close to the trunk, too obvious a kill zone. Instead, he unslung the rail spear. He dialed the weapon to coil mode, fired a grapnel of compressed monofilament, and leapt. Mid-arc, the fortress sensed him. A ripple shot through the trunk, lightning lanced upward. Cale triggered the coil, yanking himself sideways, but current crawled up the filament and slapped his suit. For an instant, every cybernetic implant seized. HUD cascaded to static, muscles locked. He tumbled, hit organic glass, skidded. A photon storm washed his vision white. Alarms screamed, muted in his ear canal augment. Then, just as suddenly, the surge cut. He lay on his back, staring at a ceiling rib that blossomed with translucent barnacles. Systems rebooted one by one. He tasted bloodsome vessel in his sinus, blown by the shock. On screen, suit integrity hovered at 62%. He rose, swaying, and tottered into a lesion tunnel that bored through the nerve trunk like a bullet hole. The edges were charred. Something powerful had burnt an artery straight through. Human sabotage? No, he realized. Internal war. Internal Eschius Shashad bore its own scars. 5 hours, 20 minutes. A sloping crawl space took him down through layers of bone foam into the cardiac mantle, where gravity began to warp even chaos' sense of time. The fortress's gravity heart was not a mere reactor. It was a living singularity engine, a pseudo-organ grown around a captured micro-back hole. Muscular tendrils massaged the horizon line, feeding it quantum thistle and adjusting the drip of Hawking radiation that powered everything else. Getting near it trained fresh forces on the laws of motion. Footfalls stretched long, syrupy. Sounds slid down octaves. His own breath became a choir of giant lungs. To cope, Cale boosted the suit's inertial dampers and injected a slug of reflex nanites into his bloodstream. The world blurred back into partial normalcy. He checked the implant schematic. He needed 3 conduits on opposite sides of the heart. Planting even one star cautery without alerting the core guardians would be close to impossible. The original plan relied on 4 Marines in staggered strikes, but impossible was the price at the door, and Cale had already paid the cover fee. He found the first conduit near what looked like a stalactite growth, riddled with optic vesicles. Each vesicle tracked him, corneas shimmering. He knelt, pressed the cautery, essentially a needle containing a portable false vacuum, into the floor membrane. Biolocks clicked. Genetic handshake executed courtesy of stolen cephalarc enzymes. A pulse of dark plunged into the conduit. When the gravity heart tried to draw on that line, it would find a vacuum dead end, backwash, then weaken as pressure equalized into nothing. 1 down. 2 hours left. The second conduit sat across a chasm of hyperdense latticework, but he never reached it. The fortress stirred, and Cale realized every optic vesicle had closed, every muscle rib shivering in a single spasm. The air quieted as though sucked out. Something enormous approached. They called it the custodian, a guardian organ distinct from the antibodies, bred solely to defend the heart. It dropped from a ceiling fissure, a behemoth of ivory armor plates studded with maw-like vents. Limbs telescoped on magnetic rails, it walked on 6-knuckled legs that could become 12 in an eye blink. At its center glimmered a pupil of folded space, gravity lensing flesh into prisms around it. Hale froze. Still fused by the coteries cable, the custodian's vent pupils swiveled, scanning smell, heat, quantum spin states. His camouflage wavered, the rail spear's residual charge sang out like a beacon. He slashed the connection, diving backward as the giant roared, a note felt more than heard, and gravity inverted. The ground became sky. He fell upward, pinwheeling. The custodian leapt to intercept, claws already lengthening. Hale fired the spear mid-tumble. A uranium spike shot through the fractal air and smashed into the guardian's pupil. Space folded wrong. The pupil shrieked singularity harmonics. Shards of standalone gravity snapped free, mauling the corridor. Hale ricocheted off a rib, hit a concave wall, and rode a collapsing pressure wave down to what had once been the ceiling. His suit wailed. 43%. Bones in his right leg jutted against titanium weave microfractures screamed. But the custodian fared worse. Its central lens blazed charcoal, singularity wounded. It tried to focus, but the spike's anti-gravitic crystals polluted local curvature. In agony, it thrashed and tore at itself, claws ripping plates. Hale, gasping, limped away while its self-noise masked him. He made it to a service artery glowing lilac. Every muscle fiber in his leg burned. He injected bone knip foam through the suit port, hissed as it solidified. The chronometer said 94 minutes. Inside the service artery, voices echoed whispers in no human language, yet distinct. He assumed cephalarc signal noise until one word bubbled to the top, repeated like a lighthouse beam. Kale. He stopped. No translator program ran live. Human syllables? Spoken by the fortress? The whisper came again, closer. Kale. Do not unmake the heart. He tapped the side of his skull where the cranial comm node sat. Identify, he murmured. Light blossomed in front of him, coalescing into a woman's figure made of soft pink radiance. Lieutenant Commander Lise Vane. Kale had mentored him through the academy, taught him how to breathe in zero-G, like it was prayer. But her eyes now were wide and ancient, and her outline fuzzed with cephalarc runic geometry. Ardes. She raised a hand of photons. Listen! He knew it was an intrusion routine, a psionic projection the fortress wove from his memories, but the emotion in his gut refused logic. You're not real, he said hoarsely. Real enough, she replied, voice carrying echoes of the heart's pulse. I am synaptic residue, yes, but the fortress let me borrow its tongue. It does not wish to kill. Disable the heart, yes, but don't kill it. There is a pattern, she shuddered, glitching. An evacuation protocol. The microcar can be vented safely. You threaten my fleet, Kale said, steadying the rail spear. You don't get sympathy. Artis, she pleaded, and for a second her war optics, her raw fear on that last day at Atar, blazed through him. If you sever the wrong conduits, the singularity will rupture. It will eat itself and everything within 1,000,000 kilometers, fleet included. His jaw clenched. The mission brief hadn't mentioned metastable collapse. Too much unknown. Did command even understand? He remembered long hours in briefing rooms, scientists arguing probabilities. He'd tuned them out, focusing on the kill steps. Now Vane Echo looked at him like he was still that cadet afraid of the dark between stars. What do you want me to do? 3 vent spiracles encase the heart, she said, gesturing. The artery walls dissolved into holographic cross-sections. Bleed the singularity's accretion disk. You can't destroy it, only starve it. And the custodian? It was meant to guard the vent sequence. Wound it? Don't kill it. It must initiate the final fold. The apparition flickered. Hurry. Then she was gone, The wall solid again. The heart beat, slower now, as though waiting. Cale moved. Doubt shadowed every step, but he'd always trusted Vane's judgment beyond his own. Maybe this was manipulation, but it aligned with his deepest unease. The fear some admiral had accepted a suicidal margin of error. He limped back toward the wounded custodian, following a trail of super-dense blood droplets that orbited themselves. The Guardian knelt in a crater of warped metal, its plates half melted. Cale approached, weapon raised, but something in its posture, an animal hunch of pain, stopped him. The spike he'd fired still lodged in the pupil, singing a high note. Slowly he stepped within arm's reach. The custodian did not lash out. Its pupil focused, and he saw mirrored there the infinite star field, the way babies stare into a parent's eyes. He reached, fingers brushing the spike's shaft. He remembered Mio's laughter, Bane's teaching, the weight of armor. Then he grabbed the spike and yanked. A waterfall of compressed neutrino light poured out. Instantly gravity stabilized. The custodian's limbs curled inward, cradling its pupilless wound, but it remained alive. "Show me the vents," he whispered. It rose one leg at a time and turned. Ribs peeled back, revealing a spiral corridor deeper than sight. Cale followed, the giant limping beside like a broken knight leading the killer to a sacred chamber. They arrived at a vast cavern. In its center hung the gravity heart, a black sun encased in translucent sacs that yawned rhythmically, sucking in stray atoms. Around it, 3 spiral tubes coiled like brass horns bent by heat. 2 glowed steady, the third flickered, half collapsed. He needed to open them all. The custodian positioned itself before a fleshy console, resting one massive claw on a cluster of orbs. Lights rippled across the vents, unlocking command pathways centuries dormant. Cale climbed a maintenance scaffold, each rung moaning under his weight, and reached the flickering horn. He slapped the last star cautery into an arterial valve and used its energy to weld the torn tissue. Seam by seam, the vent straightened, its coils blossoming. A resonant keening filled the cavern. The sacs around the heart dilated, space folded along 3 helical axes, channeling the singularity's pressure out through the vents. He felt weightlessness, then a sharp tug as the suck reversed. In orbit outside, he knew, jets of relativistic matter would spear harmlessly into the rift's void, their vectors steered away from the oncoming fleet. 40 minutes until rendezvous. Cale interfaced with the cautery sensors. Power output plummeted, heart rate dropping to a sublethal baseline. Weaponization impossible, mission nominal. He exhaled, a breathful of rust. The custodian looked at him and bowed its fractured head. The gesture was unmistakable. Cale nodded back. A calm chirp cracked against all channels. "Raven, lead, this is Fleet Command. We detect reduced gravimetric activity in the target. Confirm success." He opened the link. "Fleet Command, this is Cale. Gravity heart neutralized. Advise hold fire. Fortress is disarmed. Static. Then, orders are to eliminate. Target remains an existential threat." Cale glanced at the heart, now shivering like a newborn. He saw Vane's ghost superimposed on the air, silent. At his feet, the custodian waited, wound leaking impossible light. He toggled mute. "Can you move?" he asked the Guardian. As answer, it extended a secondary limb, tiny compared to its bulk, and tapped the scaffold. The metal glowed, reconfiguring into a capsule big enough for 1 human. Outside, the fleet's first wave would be arming breakers. Time bled sand. Cale keyed the comm, voice steady. "Fleet Command, negative. If you fire, the singularity could cascade." "I am transmitting real-time telemetry now." He dumped every sensor reading, every Hawking flux metric down the pipe. "Recommend quarantine and salvage." A silence longer than protocol allowed. Then Admiral Teague. "Lieutenant, you are asking me to disregard strategic directive." "I'm asking you not to nuke a surrendered hospital ship," Cale shot back, surprising himself with the metaphor. "You ordered me inside to stop the weapon. Mission accomplished." Another pause. Finally, hold position. Reassessment underway. The channel closed. Kale sagged against the scaffold. He could almost taste seawater and hear Mayo laughing on that beach. The custodian nudged him gently toward the waiting capsule. He climbed in. Organic metal flowed, sealing him inside a womb of bone. Data streams whispered, coordinates, truce codes, the fortress's own plea for mercy. "You came alone," a voice Vane's, or the fortress's, whispered in the dark. "But you are not alone now." Kale closed his eyes. Somewhere behind him the vents sang, venting power into the rift like a breath after drowning. Somewhere ahead the Titan fleet slowed, its guns cooling, its admirals debating. And deep within the fortress a wounded guardian watched a human soldier surrender his rail spear and for the first time believe in something other than war. Outside the rift's scar held steady, but for one heartbeat it almost seemed to close.